Thank you, Dr. Hayden. That was a wonderful introduction to the morning, and Danielle. Anyhow, I would like to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Suki Stone. Dr. Suki Stone is on a mission to get more children reading. Armed with a PhD from Claremont Graduate University and 30 years of teaching, she's created a program that gets learning disabled children reading in as little as 14 days, really. So Dr. Suki has finally, as she would say, written down her secret formula in her new book called Rethink Reading Strategies. Here to share tasty tidbits from her book is Dr. Suki Stone. All right. And I just want to add on a personal note, I know you are really going to enjoy her, find her just fascinating, very very inspiring, and she has been a longtime friend of mine. We were trying to figure out, I think it's about 38 years, so I have known her forever.
Don't we look good for being only 39? No. First, I want to tell you that I'm very glad to be here, and I am looking forward to speaking to a group of exceptional teachers. I want to introduce my career path. I lived and grew up about 90 miles. Jackie told me it's like southwest of Milwaukee. And I began my career at the University of Wisconsin to get my master's degree in special education. And it was a wonderful experience, but as successful as it seemed, it almost ended at the same time. My student teaching experience was with 18 preschool special ed children during the middle of February. In the very, very cold months, I had to take mittens off, I had to take snow pants off, and I had to take boots off. And unbeknownst to the supervising teacher, I failed. That being said, I would like to demonstrate the experiences. I've chosen 2 people to come and help me with the demonstration. Okay, I need to ask you, your name is
Greg.
Greg?
Yes.
Okay, tell me what your dominant hand is.
Left hand.
Okay, so I'm going to have you actually do, you might probably do 2 things demonstration because you are wearing shoes.
Okay.
Would you untie your one shoe with your left hand?
Sure. I'll try to.
Now I see you had a couple of knots in it, so
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you to put your left hand behind your back.
Okay.
And now tie that shoe with your right hand.
Okay.
You might want to try to also add an extra knot to it too.
I'll try it.
Not too bad. Are you sure you're not ambidextrous? But
okay.
you think you did okay, but share with me what that experience was like.
Took a long time. and it was hard, and I felt like everybody was waiting for me to finish.
That's a very, stay put, you've got another task.
Okay.
I'm going to ask you, Alyssa, to come to the board and ask you what your dominant hand is.
Left.
Okay, oh, we have a lot of left-handers here. Would you please write your name or a sentence on the board with your right hand?
Okay. There.
Now, read what you've written.
My name is Alyssa.
And what was that like to do it with an undominant hand?
It's very difficult to do it. I have my students try this sometimes and they can never get it.
To do that. And I would like you to come and do the same thing. We'll give you some space.
Write a sentence.
You can write a sentence. How was that? What was that experience like for you, Greg?
It was awkward. Awkward writing with my right hand.
Not very comfortable.
No.
So what that has taught me is that as I looked at my children once I finished my grad school, that they were not going to fail. Failure was not an option for them. And I was out to make sure that each one of them was a success. In help with my demonstration today, I would like to give you each a book.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm really, really appreciative of knowing that you all know how difficult it can be. And with that being said, I want to share with you today several strategies, 4 strategies specific to how I developed my literacy program and the beginning of what that meant for my children who were non-readers or very, very low readers. I'm also going to share with you my mission. And my mission is to help any child improve their reading levels proficiently at grade level in as short amount of time as possible. Not a speed reading course, but a course that acknowledges them as people, as human beings, and their experiences. Which brings me to Sean's story. One of the things that I do is I help the children for their positive self-concept by incorporating affirmations. And Sean was a 6th grader in my friend's class, and he read at about a 2nd, 3rd grade level. And during that time, he talked to me about his frustration and puzzlement because he would take these tests that the teacher would give, and he didn't really trust himself. He didn't know whether his answers were correct. And he also shared with me that he was tempted, he didn't want to cheat, but he was tempted to look on his neighbor's papers. And one day he told me that they took a test, and instead of handing the papers in, the teacher said, keep your paper and you can grade your own paper. And unbeknownst to him, he had the correct answer. And when he found out and looked at his neighbor's paper, his neighbor had the wrong answer. So we decided together that his first affirmation was, "I am trusting myself with the right answer." And his story was one of understanding that his skills and his ability were important to his success. And that was part of not just his affirmation, but his belief about himself and his self-concept. With that being said, my first strategy, since we had written the affirmation down, is that writing comes before reading. So let me stress that again. Writing comes before reading. Roach Van Allen, who was the superintendent of public instruction for California way, way back, and the county of San Diego, coined the phrase, "What you think you can say, what you say you can write, and what you write you can read." So he structured language experience as a writing practice before the children read. If they can read their own work, they can learn to read other people's work. Other research that I have engaged in is with Robert Sweet, who was a researcher for the Institutes of Health in Washington, D.C. And many years ago, he did, and he increased his studies, but he did a study on children's vocabulary. And children before the age of 5 have a 25,000 word vocabulary. So they come into school with all kinds of vocabulary and all kinds of meaning. And what I did when I started to work with my students, I came across this little girl, Julie. And Julie was a second grader. I worked with a lot of second graders, so the stories you'll hear will be with several second grade children. She couldn't read her name on a card, and she was definitely unable to identify her name and somebody else's name and choose her name. And I looked at all of my reading programs that I had in my classroom, those that the district bought and those that I actually purchased, and Julie tried very, very hard, but she was unable to work any of those programs. She broke all my colored pencils. She had scribbles rather than her ability to really answer the questions, because she knew that she didn't have the answer to the question, so she just scribbled something down. And she became very frustrated. And one day, I'm very dramatic. Jackie can attest to that. And one day I came into the classroom and I actually went to the table and threw everything off of her table and said, "Today, Julie, you're going to read." And I sent her to my stack of magazines and I said, "I want you to look at your favorite things, something that you love, and I want you to cut out a picture of what you love." And she made a collage of pictures that started with a B or had a B in them. So she cut out a bank, she cut out a balloon, a butterfly, and a bee. And we started to talk about banking. And I talked to her about savings accounts and checking accounts, and I wrote down the specific words. And she stopped me and she said, "But Miss Stone, there's another kind of bank." And I said, "Oh, really? What other kind of bank, Julie?" And she said, "Well, when you go fishing, you sit on a bank." And I said, "How do you know that?" And she said, "My dad takes me fishing every weekend." And I knew at that very minute that her experiences and her personal knowledge were going to teach her to read. And by the time we finished the middle of the alphabet, she was reading at a second grade level. She had a standing ovation. She brought me in second grade as her show and tell. And I was really surprised. And she read a passage in the second grade book in front of all of the children, and they gave her a standing ovation. That was really very special to me. And so I knew that I had to do something with my other children. And within understanding I want to specify the fact that when we began to write, she also comprehended because she had the knowledge base. So comprehension is the underlying advantage to the writing process. And with that, she understood things, and I kind of do a metaphor with looking at comprehension through the writing process, saying that it's sort of like the pickles and French fries with your hamburger. So I made sure that she knew, or she made sure that I knew, which comes to my other strategy. My second strategy is teachers are students, and students are teachers. And as another example of that, I was a student teacher supervisor in Kyle's second grade class. Kyle was the young man who was the little boy who was a learning disabled second grader. But I was observing his teacher. And the whole class took out a science book, and we were looking at tsetse flies. And I went, ugh, yuck. And the students didn't want to study tsetse flies. And I asked the teacher for permission. I always made sure that I did that I didn't intrude. And instead of working with tsetse flies, I made a list of insects that they wanted to study. And we had about 10, and then we rated them. So they brainstormed, so I taught them brainstorming skills, and then they rated them. And the top insect that they wanted to study was the cockroach. I thought, oh my gosh, am I going to be responsible for helping this teacher teach about cockroaches? And in the back of the room, his hand was raised, and I knew Kyle, and I knew he had learning disabilities, and he said, but Dr. Stone, I know about cockroaches. And I said, would you come up to the class and teach us? And he said, sure. And then he began to write, I was sort of his scribe, he began to tell me that cockroaches have 6 legs, 2 sets, and that they have 360-degree vision. And I said, how do you know that? That's my favorite line to say to kids. How do you know that? And Kyle said, well, I study cockroaches at home. I thought, oh, his poor mother. His poor mother. But I asked him to be a resource, and I did ask permission from the teacher. I asked him to be a resource for our unit on cockroaches. And I realized again that Kyle had been my teacher and that I was his student. He wanted to show his brilliance. So during that unit, he was very, very effective with the children in teaching them simple facts. They weren't really that simple, actually. But he knew so much more than I could have ever learned. And I do have to go back a little bit to say it was before the internet time. So you couldn't go into the internet and just look up cockroaches and just have, you had to go encyclopedias. Those were, I look good for my 39 years. Yeah. So in those days, you didn't have the technology that you do today. After my experiences with Julie and Kyle, as I was beginning to work the You Read program, I wanted to increase their vocabulary. I wanted to make sure that they knew wonderful words and they came in with their experiences, but I wanted to expand on them. So my third strategy for my program involves the big book, and I have it. It weighs sometimes more than the kids. I brought it with me today. It's Roget's International Thumbed Index Thesaurus. And I use it, I love this one because it contains 365,000 words as synonyms. So I teach the kids to have additional words. But at the same time that I love the big book, I realize today that we do have internet. And I'd like to do an experiment with the group today. I would like anyone who has a smartphone to spell the word onomatopoeia, and the first person that raises their hand and does that will get a gift. So if you have a smartphone, go into the internet and find out how to spell onomatopoeia, and raise your hand when you've done that. Oh, you've done it so quickly, Katie. Okay, so tell us. Stand up and tell us.
Onomatopoeia.
Okay, as you can listen, and you may have to spell it again for us, you can't spell the word onomatopoeia with phonics skills. Would you spell it again?
Onomatopoeia.
So I did believe, now tell me, how did you find that?
I put it in my Google search bar and it popped up right away. It like kind of knew what I was thinking.
Okay, so we do have an advantage of having technology today, and I really appreciate that, with the ability to use that tool. And for your classroom, Katie, you have the thesaurus. So I wanted to make sure, that was very quick. That was very, very quick. So I wanted to make sure that you do know that's a very, very important book, but at the same time, your classrooms also need to use high tech. And there are many ways to use high tech. And I pride myself, because I started in the dark ages, people, right? That I have increased my knowledge of the internet. And I have to share with you a sideline to my story that my children have taught me the effective use of the internet, and have said, "You don't know how to do that, Dr. Stone? I'll show you." And I feel really good about that. I try to use them whenever I can. So the big book is something that I really, really love. Now, with the big book comes a story from my past. Actually, the video is on my website, about Giovanni. And Giovanni wrote stories about his favorite thing, which is baseball. And even though we're in Wisconsin and Milwaukee Brewers are the favorites, I go back to the Milwaukee Braves, so I'm really old school. But he loved the Padres, and he wrote his story about the Padres, and he really loved words. He loved listening to words. So when I asked him how he felt when his brother took him to the baseball games, he said he felt fabulous. And I said, "How do you know that word?" I said, "That's my," and he said, "I've heard it enough times, and I know that it means really wonderful things. And that's what I feel when my brother takes me to the Padre games." So I'm looking at increasing his vocabulary and understanding his passion, which comes to my fourth strategy about passion. And passion is really, really important. Sometimes we think we know what the children love, and we don't ask them. I remember a situation where I was working with a child, and I asked the parent to stay there. And I said to the child, tell me what your passion is. And he loved sports, but football really, really was the number one thing. And he said to me, well, you know, I kind of like to watch basketball. And his mom said, basketball? That's the first time I've heard basketball. And I said to the parent, I said, you learn all kinds of new things by listening to your children. So I'm asking, in my understanding of passion for these children, they are able to read what they want to read. And I have examples of things that changed my life because I was restricted and was very restrictive and believed that, I'm going to give you my first outside here, believed that comic books was a no-no. I've changed my attitude about comic books. And I have a set of comic books in my students' classrooms because that's something that they love. And if it encourages them to read, I can't ask for more. The other thing that I think we all are aware of, several years ago, there was an author who actually took a long while before she got her books published. But we went on just a whole reading journey with the Harry Potter series. And knowledge, this is extremely important. I looked this up. If a child reads all 7 volumes, they have read 5,600 pages. So if they're inspired to read Harry Potter, even if they don't know a word, they can ask their parent or their teacher or even a fellow friend what the word says. Most likely they'll know the meaning. And I encourage children to read what they really, really like. Now, in today's, actually it was yesterday's USA Today, current events, there's a CEO of YouTube. Here I go again with my internet, and I'm beginning to be, I don't know if I'll ever be a techie, but I'm beginning to know a little bit more about it than I did. She was motivated to do YouTube videos from her children. Her child was very interested in history, and he wanted a simpler way to understand the wars and Stalin and all the things that happened. And she said she created videos for him to watch. And while looking at those videos, he was motivated to read the stories. And that happened to Manny. Manny was a student of mine. He was a 9th grader. And he was told he would never get to college. He was reading at a 3rd grade level. And his English department teacher did the Diary of Anne Frank. And the only reason he was able to pass any of the tests was because he watched a video and he knew the story. And when he came to me to actually read and improve his reading skills, at the end I said, Manny, what book would you like to read? And he said, Doctor, I have not read the Diary of Anne Frank because I couldn't read that book when I was with my class. Can we read that book? And I said, yes, let's do that. And today, Manny holds 2 college degrees when he was told he would never get to college. So I feel inspired that my children have given themselves the perseverance and tenacity to be able to achieve more than other people think they can. And it's heartwarming for me to look at the fact that if they read what they like, they will be motivated to read other things because passion drives us. Passion drives us as adults. I want to share with you some things that are now statistics, going here, moving here, with all of the positive examples that I've given about children I've taught, we still have statistics that are shocking. And it's a 2013 statistics, the National Center for Statistics shows us, and I'm going to bring it up, that 80% of our African American and Hispanics still read below basic level, and combined read below basic level. 50% of our white or Caucasian students read below basic level. In addition, adult statistics in 2013 from the U.S. Department of Literacy have said that 32 million adults cannot read. That's 14% of our population. And 21% of those adults can't read at 5th grade level. Our newspapers are at 5th grade level. These people, adults, can't read at 5th grade level. So combining the children and adults, I have come to the conclusion that illiteracy is the hidden disease of America. With that said, I want to share two of my experiences with adult learners. One my mother introduced me to. Gail is currently a friend of mine and a business owner. She owns 3 different businesses. She's 57 years old, and she does read, but she's a horrible speller. And she just can't spell and retain spelling words. And she came to me and said, "Suki, would you please teach me to spell? I feel very embarrassed when I get up in front of a group and I can't spell." And I use Grace Fernald's spelling skills as part of my You Read program to teach children to spell. And what I did with her was practice her favorite word that she couldn't spell, which was the word beautiful. And we practiced, and then there was time that there was just airtime in between to see if she could retain it. And so we talked a little bit, 5-10 minutes, and then I gave her a sheet of paper and said, "Now spell the word beautiful." And she laughed, and she said, "I remember it. I can really spell it." And said to me, "I now have the word beautiful for my life. And with your system, I can spell any word. You have just changed my spelling life, and I feel really confident learning to spell new words." And that to me was beautiful. My cup says, "You are beautiful." My second adult story comes from my mother. My mother was supposed to be here today, and I am really glad that she'll be able to watch this on video. But she was watching Oprah one day when Oprah had her show. And Oprah had a gentleman by the name of Alfred, who was a 69-year-old man that had never learned to read. He didn't learn to read because his mother needed him to do sharecropping. And she said, "I can't teach you to read because I don't know how to read, but I can teach you to do math so you'd never get cheated." So when he was on the Oprah show, he shared with Oprah that he wanted to learn to read so he could go to school to become a contractor. And my mother phoned me and said, Suki, you can teach Alfred. Well, I met Alfred. Alfred lives in St. Joseph's, Missouri, and he was an amazing individual. In fact, I have several stories about Alfred. One that my mom reflected yesterday, and I said to her, I'm going to tell that story. I had really forgotten it. We were writing Alfred's first story. He was a contractor. He was a construction worker. He worked for a company all his life, but he knew how to build houses. And I said to him, that's his passion. Let's do a story about how to build a house. And we had written about maybe 5 sentences or so. I don't have them do 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 sentences. We do short stories. And we were at about the 5th sentence, maybe 6th, and I said, Alfred, I said, you've written a lot. We need to stop now. He said, Doctor, we can't stop. The house has no roof. So with that, I also taught him words from the thesaurus, and he told me that he had favorite things that he really loved. And he could spell the word loved, and he knew the word loved, so we looked up love in the thesaurus and found the word for predilection. And at the end of his session one day, he said to Mrs. Hamilton, who had been his first grade teacher, the doctor really likes to teach these big words in this big book. And she said, what have you learned today? And he said, I learned the word predilection. That means I love it. Mrs. Hamilton, I love to read. I have a predilection for reading. It's amazing the changes that happen one child at a time, one adult at a time, within the process of looking at their experiences and what they bring to the table. So I'm sharing with you. First, let me summarize my 4 strategies. Writing comes before reading. Teachers are students, and students are teachers. Use the thesaurus or the internet, good old Google, thanks, Katie, to build children's vocabulary. And the 4th strategy is understanding that passion drives the learner. They must be passionate about what they are learning, or contribute to things that they know in what's being taught in the classroom. With that said, I also want to just review, to summarize Julie. Julie knew about sitting on a bank when she went fishing with her dad. Sean knew that he was trusting himself with the right answer when he doubted that he had the answer and was looking to other children for that answer. Kyle was a real winner for me because he helped teach the unit on cockroaches. It was quite a unit. And Alfred really knew that he had a predilection for learning to read. He taught me, you need a roof on a house or it's not complete. I'm looking at concluding with a couple of points. In order to get where I have gotten within my career and my change, I had to change my paradigm. And I want to stress that paradigm shift is not about a new approach. It's not about designing a new program. It's about changing your values and beliefs about what you believe about children and what they come into school with, accepting their own knowledge base as the foundation for teaching them to read. Understanding that as they grow and as they increase, they are still learning, but their knowledge is expanding, and they need to share that knowledge. So you need to become the student sometime. Also, a change of paradigm is a real understanding that it's a change in the basic set of what you take as assumptions. You cannot assume that children don't have the knowledge. I learned that late in life, but I learned it. And it changed my ability to work with my children. Thomas Kuhn, who wrote Scientific Revelations, was the originator of understanding what a paradigm is. So I'm going to ask myself to continue to have a change of paradigm and to ask you to join me. To cure the hidden disease of illiteracy, we need to change our paradigm, and we need to start now. I want to thank you for coming today, and I hope you enjoy all the remaining sessions. It's been a pleasure to have you here, to have me speak to you, and to have me share my knowledge. Within the day, you'll share your knowledge with me, and I appreciate that. Do you have any questions? There's time for questions if you have any. I think maybe I spoke too fast. Yes?
You mentioned Kunal, and that's her reading method is my very, very favorite. It's also very time intensive and person intensive. How do you do that when you have?
Well, what I do, and this is, I was able to do this. I had an aide that worked with a group of children when I worked with my one. And they were, and I don't want to refer to the children as revolving doors, but as I worked with each child, they transfer, and there were different times of the day that I did that. So that they would practice. So I taught them the skill. The children learned the skill, and they would practice their spelling. They would practice their reading. I did everything in threes as well. So they said the word, they looked at it, they traced it. Some of the children, depending on the age, we used sand if we could get it, but we used salt, not sugar. No, the bugs were like, yeah, no, we didn't want to do that. But, right, but the major thing was getting them, and the words they chose to learn to spell were words within their story. So they weren't words that they were teaching me about. You know, I told this child that it was Giovanni, but I also had another child who was a baseball nut, and he was good at baseball, and he was talking about the position or something, and I told him that I was a Milwaukee, I mean, he kept up baseball stuff, and I told him that I was a Milwaukee Braves and a Brewer fan, and, you know, and then he said, but you don't know that? And I said, very authentically, no, I don't. He said, I'll teach you. And so that the interchange happens. But you take the kids, or you do it, sometimes I had to do it after school. I got permission from parents. They would pick the children up, you know, later, and it changed the attitude when they came home. They were happier kids. And it just, but it took a lifetime. I've been doing this for, well, I don't want to share how long my mother would have, no. But a long time. And I learn as I go. When I first started, I did the letters of the alphabet. I mentioned that in Julie's story. So we did the B and, well, most of the consonants, the B, the C, the D. By the time we got to the letter L, she was reading at a second grade level. Now I do passion. What's your passion? What can you tell me that you love, that you can teach me about? And I love this little story of Rosita in Texas, in Brownsville, Texas. I did my program as an experiment for one of, again, a student teaching experience. And I said the children were all different levels and all different disabilities. It wasn't just learning disabilities. And I said, who wants to learn to read today? And Rosita raised her hand, and I said, oh, Rosita, come join me at the table. And I said, I want to start out with your passion. She looked at me and she said, I can say anything I want? I said, yes, you can. And she said, I love horses. And that's the way she started. And so it depends. And the teacher, you know, she had aides so that was able. So, and sometimes when I didn't have aides, I did a co-op with my neighbor teacher. And she did an activity. It was an art activity with the rest of the class. So we did a trade-off. And when the kids started to really read, then it became, oh, this is interesting. Okay, go ahead and continue this. So they had to see it first. And my goal is to, and I would love to do it here in this area because my mom lives in Milwaukee and she would love to have me home. But it's to do a pilot project in a classroom. It's to show the effectiveness of it. So if there's any way that you want to talk with me during the day, I'm here, and you can come. What I'm doing for the breakout is I'm doing a detailed on the very first strategy is why writing comes before why writing comes before reading.
I was wondering, I'm a student teacher in a program that is very structured because it's for teaching. I mean, it's for teaching children, and I'm in a. I mean, it's for teaching adults how to teach children, and I'm in 3, 1/2, and 4-year-old class, and there's a child there that. But because he's not a certain age, he hasn't been moved. In other words, they go by their warm date. Who's very bright. I mean, he's constantly teaching me things. Is there anything, now I'm only a student teacher, but is there anything I could do for this child? He's so bored. By 11 o'clock, he's acting out because he's just totally bored. It's like, I know this stuff. Is there anything I can do within that structure that, like during the day, during the morning that I could just like put in and give them something?
I would need a little bit more detail to give you something specific. Okay. So stop me today. I'm here all day because my ride is over there. So stop me and we can discuss something specific for you. Any other questions? It's just been a pleasure, and I've really enjoyed it, and I hope you guys enjoyed it too.